Welcome to our webinar. My name is Sandra.
And this
And
is Sarah.
yes, and we are interns at the AUC in the Counseling Center services at AUC. And we'll be talking today about how to manage anxiety and stress in the light of COVID-19, which is the crisis that we are experiencing today. So normally we self-introduce ourselves because it's a group in general, but since it's only me and you, Sarah, we're going, of course, to be giving people who are listening to us a space to think and do with us the exercises which we're going to tell and teach them. And teach you. So these are mainly the group goals that we're going to be discussing today. So first, we're going to be, actually, it's not only today, it's going to be today and later on with our next week or our second video webinar. So the group goals is to first, we're going to be able to deal with anxiety that triggered by COVID-19 crisis. So also we're going to learn more about the meaning of anxiety. So what is anxiety? Also, we're going to recognize one's anxiety in general and the symptoms behind our feelings of anxiety. We're going to recognize it and how it's coming from with different shapes. Also how it affects us emotionally, physically, behaviorally, and also cognitively. And that's going to be in our next video. Also, we're going to learn more about our thinking errors. That's also going to be in our next video. And finally, how to manage anxiety in crisis. And that's going to be in the way of giving you and teaching you some ways and techniques on how to manage anxiety during this crisis, or generally with our anxiety generally. So first question we like to ask you is, actually anxiety is always a bad thing, or anxiety it can be just something that's present? So what do you think? What is anxiety to you, and what does anxiety mean to you, as a bad thing or as a good thing? We're going to give you a couple of seconds to think about this, and then we're going to proceed. You can just use a piece of paper to write your thoughts, or maybe you can think in your head, maybe on your phone, whatever that makes you comfortable. Okay, so back to if anxiety is a bad thing or not. So anxiety is not always maladaptive. It is mainly maladaptive, or we can see it as something that's bad or problematic. I would like to say it is mainly problematic when it interrupts our functioning. So when we get to feel unable to function in our daily life with our daily activities, when it gets to be interrupted, all of these things, this means that anxiety is becoming harmful and is becoming maladaptive to our daily life. Also, we need to remember that anxiety is one of the emotions, of the primary emotions that we feel in our life every day. And sometimes it can act like a reminder. And Sarah, of course, she's going to get us more into details about the meaning of anxiety from a scientific side. So I'll also want to explain how I personally see anxiety in a more visual way. So I like actually to see anxiety as an iceberg. So when we're in a ship or in a boat, we get only to see the tip of the iceberg. We completely ignore the fact that maybe there is more underneath this water. So what's underneath the surface of the water, it's a big bulk of the rest of this iceberg. But what we only can see from with our naked eyes is only the tip of the iceberg, which is completely very small, and it's very limited than what's actually underneath. So I like to see anxiety as also, if we're going to see the iceberg as us human beings, so we only see what happens from the surface. We only see our behavior. We only see the reactions that we act upon our anxiety, but we don't actually know what's underneath our waters, and we don't actually know what's underneath our anxiety. So what's underneath it? What's more to it? So that's what we're going to talk a little bit more with Sarah.
Exactly, Sandra. So what you just said, like the underneath emotions that's behind the behavior of anxiety, is actually like basically it's the trigger. So we need to understand the trigger, and to do so, we need to first know and identify the meaning of anxiety. So what is anxiety in the first place? So anxiety is a general fear or panic that activates a fight or flight mode. So as you said earlier, it's actually something it's not harmful all the time. It's only harmful when it's excessive. So when I do it all the time to an extent that it hinders my daily tasks and my daily functioning, this is when it can be problematic. Other than that, it's a very normal state to be. It actually helps us survive. So am I going to fight the anxiety, or am I going to avoid it? Also, a very important point to understand about anxiety is that it is a general fear of possible danger. And the word possible here is very important. So actually, it can be a fear of danger that is not guaranteed. So I'm afraid of something that is hypothetical. It's a possible thing. It might happen and it might not happen, but still it's generating a long lasting fear for me. And usually it is future oriented. And this is when it can actually affect and impairs our functioning. And sometimes it can develop some anxiety disorders to some of us. Um, we're going to talk today about different anxiety components. Today, we're going to cover three of them. So we're going to talk about the physical component, the behavioral component, and the emotional component. And then in our next video, we're going to talk about the cognitive component. So in very simple words, anxiety means its definition is fear, apprehension, and worry. So we're going to start with the emotional component and how our emotions is related to anxiety. How do I feel my anxiety? Where do I feel it in my body? So this is actually one of the basic components, and it's unconsciously we do it. So it's involuntarily, it's autonomic. So we react to the situation that in a way, to a stressful situation in a way that is triggered by our emotions. So the first step here is to understand our emotions and the triggers. So this is a very interesting wheel of emotions that we all personally use, professionally actually use with our clients, and it's very beneficial to use it personally. It's a wheel of emotions. So as you can see, it's full of emotions. The inner circle talks about the very primarily and main emotions that we all experience, and usually you're going to find it in your daily vocabulary. So very simple, and we can all identify to them. So we have happy, we have surprise, there is fear, there is anger, and there's disgust and sadness. So these are very basic emotions. And then you have the secondary level, which is actually the deeper level of emotion. So under fear, you will find there is anxious, there is insecurity, there is submissive, there is rejection, there is inferiority. So when it comes to the current circumstances that we're in with the COVID-19 and the anxiety that's related to it, there's definitely a fear of uncertainty, Sandra. So a lot of us feel that we are anxious because we don't know what's happening and what's going to happen next, until when we're going to stay in this quarantine or in our home and not seeing and connecting with our loved ones. So
Definitely.
yeah, so fear is like the basic emotion. But if we can think of other secondary emotions that is really underlying this primary fear, it can be anxious, it can be scared, it can be terrified. We can be overwhelmed and worried with all what's happening. We can feel alienated in a way, like all of us, every one of us is sitting in their home. Some of us are not with their families, some of us are not with their friends and loved ones. So from here we can say the word fear, or the emotion fear, is related to anxiety. Another very common another common emotion that people experience right now with the current situation with the COVID-19 is sadness. And under sadness, there is boredom. So most of us are like, our daily routine is like, we don't have a daily routine. We don't go to work. We don't drive our car. We don't see the same people that we saw all through the week. So somehow we're bored. We don't know what to do.
There.
Yes, exactly. Also, there might be like a feeling of loneliness, depressed. Some people might fear that they're isolated in a way, or empty because they're lonely. They don't connect as much. So as you can see, our emotions actually is not a simple thing. So it's not just sad or happy. There's, as you can see, hundreds and tens of other emotions that can actually contribute to our anxiety. So we're going to wait for a couple of seconds, and you can take a picture of this wheel of emotion that we really advise you to use whenever you feel you're out of words, or that you want to identify how you're feeling right now. You can definitely use this, and it can help you. Okay. Now we're going to move on to some emotional symptoms, very common, 12 common emotional symptoms that anxious people feel. And you can you can see if you can relate to any of these emotions or not. So there's anxiety, there's denial, fear, survivor guilt, uncertainty of feelings. So some people when they're anxious, they're not sure how do they feel. So I'm not sure, am I happy, am I dealing with this situation very well and I'm not even anxious, or I'm extremely anxious and I really want to see my friends and I fear that my loved ones would be hurt or something like that. There's depression as well that can be related to the loneliness and isolation. There is grief, there is hopelessness. There is a feeling of being overwhelmed, lost, or abandoned. So you might feel overwhelmed, like you're many emotions at one when you're anxious. You're wishing to hide or die. Some people experience anxiety with anger, so they're angry at the situation, or they are angry at themselves for being anxious. And some people reported feeling numb, so like I'm not feeling anything at all, and this is how I'm dealing with my anxiety. So it's important that each one of us reflect and see, what emotional symptoms do I experience with the current crisis or the current situation. So think about it and see if you can relate to any of these emotions related to anxiety. So now we're going back to the interesting iceberg picture that Sandra introduced in the beginning, but this one's a more detailed one. So we're going to talk about anxiety. We have above the surface and below the surface. Usually above the surface is the behavior that you do when you're anxious. So this is what you do, and this is what people see when you're anxious. So there's negativity, there's lack of focus, like not being able to focus and be productive right now. There's the over planning. So some people when they're anxious, they just bombard themselves with tasks and planning and some things to do that actually are not doable, or it's not a smart objective. There's anger. There's being on edge, when you're like agitated, and anything, even as simple as a small situation, can make you on edge and angry. There's some sleep issues. So some people might find themselves not sleeping at all, or not sleeping well, or sleeping all the time. And there's also avoidance. So yeah, this people choose to like hide. So sometimes I choose to hide and distance myself from others when I'm anxious. And then we have below the surface feelings, and these are actually the triggers to this behavior, and it's the emotions that we just talked about. So the emotions that's underneath the surface, as Sandra said, it's very deep. It's actually bigger than what's showing in the surface. So this shows you how it is important to identify your emotions and know it, because it's the driving force for your anxiety, basically. So you have being stuck, feeling stuck, depressed, unlovable, helpless, feeling overwhelmed, feeling insecure, feeling disrespected, having feelings of shame, rejection, being stressed or confused or lonely, feeling detached. Some people might feel guilt, hurt, or jealous. So there's a lot of many, many, many emotions that can be a trigger for one's anxiety. So it's important to understand our emotions, as we just said. Now we're going to move on to the physical component with Sandra.
Okay, so thank you, Sarah. Now we talked about the emotional component, and this is going to be our second component we talk about, which is the physical component. And I personally liked so much this component. Can you, before going to this slide, so I don't want it to be burnt and everyone see it. So before going to the symptoms of this physical component, I wanted to talk a little bit about I personally like the physical component because it's one of the most clear reminders that the body start showing you and start aching you with, so so that you can start hearing what's going on into your heart, that's completely out, what's going on into your feelings and emotions, that's completely being reflected on your body and on your physique. So the physical components, they become very uncomfortable, and it become very irritable to us, because it's like nagging us and telling us, okay, so we are in pain, so can you please do something? And it's also, it's like preparing the body for the fight or flight. So our physique gets so much prepared with the fight or flight whenever a situation like COVID-19 is happening. Therefore, it automatically starts doing some defense mechanism, like we can call it. It wants to just to protect the body. So going to the symptoms that we can sometimes experience during anxiety or during a current crisis when we feel anxious. So the first one can be nausea. This is a very common symptom. Tremors, we get to feel some tremors. Also chills, we get to feel chills in our body. Also diarrhea, but also a very very common one, which is not written in these symptoms, is constipation. So a lot of people, they get very constipated during this phase, and or during any type of phase that has anxiety. So also muscle aches and rapid heart rates, this is a very also common one. Dry mouth, shaking, visual problems, and fatigue. So these 10 symptoms, they are present whenever there is an experience that you're going through which is making you feel anxious. So therefore your physique starts giving you some symptoms, or I would like to call them alerts, which are making you more aware that, okay, so it's hurting, so can you please remind yourself to look at my physical symptoms. So what can be some of the physical symptoms that you are experiencing today from these 10 symptoms? We'll give you a couple of seconds to think about this, and then we'll go continue about telling you more about other symptoms that you could be feeling. Okay. So other symptoms of anxiety also can be, like we mentioned, muscle tensions. And muscle tensions, it has different types of uh, pain, that a physical pain that someone can feel, like headaches. And headaches is very common because we get to think a lot about the situation that we're in. We get to think a lot, okay, so a lot about, okay, so when this is going to end. We get to have a lot of pain and discomfort in our body, such as neck pain or shoulders pain or lower back. um, Also, we get to feel a lot of chest pain, like heart palpitations, and we just mentioned it, and other sensation problems in your arms, or it also can be just normal fatigue or stomach aches in general. So, do you experience any of these symptoms? And where in your body? So is it in your chest? Is it in your head? Is it in your palms of your hands? Or is it in your arm? Is it in your legs? Is it in your back? So ask yourself these questions. It's good and important to become more aware about what's going on and what are the effects that are the problems that are occurring, that are affecting our body and affecting our hearts and affecting our being in general. And also it's important to rate the worst symptom of them all. And also it's important to be aware about what is the most frequent symptoms of them all, so that we can afterwards have like a way to manage and to calm down our bodies and to be able to listen to our bodies. um, and now I guess Sarah, you're going to take us to the journey of to our third component, the behavioral component.
Yes, exactly. So now we're going to talk about our third component, which is the behavioral component. And this is the one that we can actually all put our hands on. And it's what we do. It's our action. It's our behavior. So this is, I think, Sandra, this is the first thing that we notice when they're anxious.
Yes.
So statistics showed actually that anxiety can be related to reduced performance. And we get this a lot from people around us, whether they're our clients, people that we know personally, ourselves actually, is that during this crisis that we're in, although that all of us, most of us are sitting at home, we have more time than we usually have. We don't like waste time in traffic. There's no any daily activities or outings that we go in. So we have many hours a day. So we're supposed to, if we're going to talk by the book, we're supposed to be more productive. We have all the time, we're staying at home, so we might as well have all the energy but somehow our performance is reduced. We're not being productive or as productive as we would like to be. And this can actually be related to anxiety. So this can be a behavioral component related to anxiety, which is our reduced performance during this tough time that we're all facing. So there are some behavioral patterns that people adopt when they're anxious. So all of us are different, and each one of us experience anxiety in a different way, and they deal with it or handle it in a different way. So we have 10 different behavioral patterns that people resort to when they're anxious. So some people can resort to having a change in activity. So they might start doing things differently. They might start doing things that they didn't do before. So this is a change in activity. Some people might withdraw. So you might find yourself sitting in bed or in your room alone, not even mingling with your family or sitting outside in the living room. It's withdrawal. So I'm anxious. I'm really anxious, and I want to sit with my thoughts and with my anxiety. Some people might be suspicious, so they might start like questioning everything and everyone, and like even the news, we will start questioning it, and the rates and the death rates, and what's happening, is it real, is it not, and so on. So you might become suspicious of the facts and the things you're hearing, and this is coming actually from anxiety. There can be change in communication patterns. So some people who are usually not really, if we can say, like outgoing or would be like socially very active, right now you will find them like on house party and on social media channels, just talking to people and just connecting, because we need that. We miss it from the isolation. So you might find change in communication patterns. There might be change in interpersonal interactions as well. There's also a variation in food consumption. And this is very ironic because all our social media and posts, we see like people baking and making pizza, and it's like the thing that we enjoy right now. So some people might eat a lot when they're anxious, or they eat less than they usually do. So there's variation in the food consumption. And then the seventh one, which is very interesting for me and Sandra, is the excessive humor one. And this is actually, it's very relatable to us Egyptians. Like, it's how we deal with our anxiety. So whether it was during the revolution or right now with the COVID-19 and the pandemic, we use a lot of humors, right? We just, like, our social media is filled with like jokes about what's happening and very humorous part things. So this is actually how we're dealing with the anxiety. It doesn't mean that we're not anxious and we're just having fun with what's going on. No, actually we are, but this is how we're dealing with it. There's also excessive silence. So some people would resort to not talking about what's happening. So they're silent about it. There is some unusual behaviors, and some people might increase their smoking consumption or alcohol consumption with anxiety. So I'm sure most of us or some of us would relate to any of these 10 behavioral patterns when they're anxious. So take a second look at them and see what do you do? How do you behave when you're anxious? So ask yourself again, do any of you experience any of these behavioral patterns when anxious? So what is it? Think about that.
It's important.
Now,
Okay.
Sandra's great. We're going to move on now, Sandra, with the Beck Anxiety Inventory. So this is actually a self-assessment, a very simple one that each and every one of us can do at home, just to assess their anxiety level and understand what's the intensity of it. Is it mild? Is it extreme? So we're going to just explain it to you, and we're going to keep the screen on for a couple of seconds so you can take a picture of it and you can do it at home. And we're going to show you later on how to score it. So basically, these are all the left column are very basic symptoms of anxiety that you might be experiencing. And then you will have to rate each and every symptom from 0 to 3. So 0 means not at all. So I don't experience this symptom, not at all. And then we have the 1, which is the mildly. So I experience it, but it didn't bother me much. And then there's the moderate, which is the 2, which is it wasn't pleasant at times. So yes, I'm experiencing it and it's not pleasant. And then we have the severely one, which is the 3, and it means that it bothered me a lot. And you're going to do this rating to each and every symptom on the left side. And then at the end, when you finish all the scoring, you're going to sum up all of these bottom columns. So we're going to sum the 3s together, the 2s together, the 1s together. And then we are going to to get the grand score, or the score that will actually help us know the intensity of our anxiety, is to sum up these 3 columns together. The 4 actually, but the 0 is a 0. So these 4 columns together. And you will get here the grand score. So what are we gonna do with it? So when you get your number, you're gonna move on. I'm just gonna keep this for a couple of seconds, and then we're gonna move on to the scoring. So feel free to take a picture of it and to do it after this video to understand more your anxiety. And
Yeah.
you can find yourself actually surprised with your score. Okay, we're gonna now talk about the scoring. So, okay, so I get this number, what do I do with it? So this is the spectrum of anxiety. We have 4 different levels of anxiety. We have from 0 to 7, means that it is minimal anxiety. So this one is less than mild. And then we have from 8 to 15, the mild anxiety. From 16 to 25, this is the moderate anxiety. And then if you get your score between 30 to 63, this means that you're severely anxious. So this is how you can actually understand your anxiety and the intensity of it during this time that we're in. So you can also take a picture of this scoring table to be able to assess yourself after we finish. Okay. So Sandra's gonna sum up today's video.
Okay, so to sum up, of course, what we did today, it's mainly that we wanted to inform you that there is no right way, there is no right and wrong to express our one's anxiety and cope with it. So each and every person is different and it's unique. Each and every person is unique in the way they express their anxiety, in the way they cope with their anxiety. So some people it can work with them the muscle relaxation technique, and others can work with them more the breathing technique or the grounding technique. So people cope differently. And also it's important to remember that acknowledging your emotion, physical and behavioral symptoms, they are also our gateway to understand and cope with our anxiety. So before knowing, okay, so that we are unique and express our anxiety, it's also important to start acknowledging, so what are the symptoms in each and every component? And then you're going to be able to find your gateway to understand more, so your anxiety and how we're going to cope with it. Also, it's important to remember that they are all connected. So the emotion, physical, and behavioral, they're all connected, like we saw in the iceberg. So the iceberg contains lots of emotion and behaviors, but also it contains a lot of how it's going to affect our physique. So it can make us unable to feel a lot of heartaches, feel a lot of constipation, feel heart palpitations. So all of these components, they are affecting each other. So if we take care of one, it's going to actually help the other. So it's important to listen to them, and it's important to recognize them.
Yes,
Uh,
exactly. And this is actually, we're going to complete this journey of the 4 components of anxiety in our next video, but we're
yes,
going to focus more on the cognitive components. So today we talked about the physical, emotional, and behavioral one. We're going to talk next about the most interesting one, and the most important one actually is the cognitive component, and how it affects actually on the current crisis. We're going
yes.
to identify together some common thinking errors that increase our anxiety. So most of us at a certain point in time get anxious, and most of us have some like cognitive distortions or thinking errors that we do that can actually trigger an anxiety or increase it. So we're going to learn how to manage one's anxiety during this crisis. And this is the most important part from our webinar actually, is to learn altogether some techniques on how to minimize our anxiety and become more aware of managing it within the
Like
four
the one we did
components.
today, Saro. Like
Exactly.
like the 3 exercises we did today. And
Yes.
I believe we would actually very much encourage you for the next couple of days, that or even the next couple of months, that you use these techniques in minimizing your anxiety and helping your bodies to express themselves in a
Yes,
relaxing way.
exactly, Sandra. Yes, so this was it for today, guys. So we hope that you understand now your anxiety and you're more aware of it if you have an anxiety. So by now you should be understanding or knowing the symptoms, whether it's behavioral, emotional, or um, behavioral symptoms that you might be or physical, sorry, symptoms that you might be feeling with anxiety.
And I hope this webinar helps you for the current crisis and the current situation that we're going through, everyone, all of us worldwide. We want you to stay safe and to stay home. And thank you for listening to us.
Thank
Uh,
you very much, guys.
yes, we definitely hope for you to start using these techniques that we provided today. And we'll see you, of course, next video, in our next video.
Yes,
That's it.
yes, yes. Stay safe, stay home, and don't miss our next video. And we'll
Yes.
talk more about anxiety.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.